Shane Teller hadn't planned on bartending again, especially not with his 6-year-old son asleep in the back office of a dive bar that smelled like spilled whiskey and desperation. But life didn't care about plans. Not when your ex-wife skipped town, your rent was late, and your usual construction job got shut down by city permits. So when his buddy called in a panic, begging him to cover a shift, Shane had shoved a blanket and a stuffed dinosaur into his backpack, scooped up little Silas, and stepped behind the bar like it was 2012 again. It was just one night. That's what he told himself, until she walked in. She didn't belong there. Not in that low-lit place with sticky floors and a flickering neon sign. Her heels clicked too cleanly, her coat was too tailored, and her hair long, dark, and perfect framed a face that looked like it belonged in a boardroom, not sandwiched between bar stools and a pool table. She slid onto the stool right in front of him like she owned the place, not in a showy way. In a quiet, unbothered way, like nothing could touch her, Shane wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. "What'll it be?" "Bourbon. Neat," she said, her voice low and smooth. "Whatever you think is good." He poured her a glass of the only halfway decent stuff they had and slid it across the bar. She took a slow sip, then smiled. "You're not the regular guy, nope, just filling in tonight." "Shame," she said, eyes flicking up to meet his. "You're good at this." Shane gave a tight nod, trying not to notice how pretty she was. He didn't have time for pretty. Pretty didn't pay rent or make Silas's school lunches. Pretty didn't fix the fact that he had $72 in his bank account and a kid who needed new shoes, but she kept talking. Asking about the drinks, the jukebox, the old guitar hanging behind the bar. And despite himself, Shane found he was answering. He hadn't had a real conversation with a woman in months. When the night started to slow and the last few customers filtered out, she was still there, nursing her second bourbon. "You always hang out in bars like this?" he asked, drying a glass. She laughed softly. "Not usually, but I needed to clear my head, long day." "Yeah, what do you do?" She paused. "I work in management." He raised a brow. "That vague, hush." She smiled again, this time with a little spark. "Let's just say I sign a lot of checks," he chuckled. "Must be nice." She tilted her head. "What would you do if someone handed you a blank check right now?" Shane glanced toward the office door, where Silas was curled up with his dinosaur, safe for now. "I'd buy my kid a new pair of sneakers. And maybe fix the brakes on my truck so I'm not playing roulette every time I stop at a red light." She blinked, then looked down at her glass. "That's a good answer." She pulled a folded bill from her clutch and slid it across the bar. He picked it up, then froze. $100 tip. "Hey, this is too much." "No, it's not," she said, voice calm. "You've earned it." He stared at her. "You don't even know me." "I think I know enough." With that, she stood and grabbed her coat. "What's your name?" "Shane," she nodded. "Nice to meet you, Shane." "I'm Fallon." Then she was gone, heels clicking against the pavement, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the ghost of something he couldn't quite name. The next night she came back, same bourbon, same seat. Shane didn't ask questions. He just poured her drink and tried not to look like he was waiting on the door to open. She stayed longer this time. Talked more. Told stories about growing up in Boston, how she hated elevators, how she once got food poisoning on a yacht and had to give a presentation the next morning anyway. She didn't act like someone who made more in a week than he made in a year. But Shane could tell there was something about her. Something polished, controlled, and Fallon, whoever she really was, seemed to like listening to him. Like really listening. About Silas, about his job search, about the time he got kicked out of a wedding for breaking up a fight between the bride's brothers. She laughed easily. Her eyes lit up, and when she left, she tipped another 100. By the end of the week, Fallon had become a regular and Shane had stopped pretending it wasn't the highlight of his night. Silas started asking, "Will the lady with the shiny shoes be there?" And Shane would grin and say maybe, but still. He didn't ask what she really did. He didn't want to ruin it with money talk or status or anything that reminded him how different their worlds probably were, until Friday night. She showed up in a black dress, hair pulled back, looking like she'd just come from a red carpet. Shane raised his brows. "Big night?" he asked. Fallon shrugged, sliding onto her stool. "Annual shareholder gala. I left early." He poured her drink. "Not a fan of parties. I like real ones. Not the kind where everyone's pretending they don't hate each other." He laughed. Sounds like my family reunions. She looked at him, really looked. You always this funny, or am I just the lucky one? He leaned on the bar. I think you're the lucky one. She laughed and touched his hand just for a second, but it hit him like a jolt. Then Silas's voice echoed from the back. Dad, Shane turned, heart dropping. One sec, he ducked into the office. Everything okay, bud? Silas rubbed his eyes. Can I have some crackers? Yeah, I'll grab you some. When he came back out, Fallon was watching the door. That your son? She asked. Yeah, Silas, he's cute. Thanks, he's a handful, she smiled. Must be tough doing all this alone. Shane's jaw tightened. Yeah, but he's worth it. Fallon nodded, then reached into her clutch. I have to go, but here she slid a card across the bar. He picked it up and blinked. Fallon Hartley, CEO, Hartley and Linwood Investments. His stomach dropped. You're a CEO, she stood, giving him a sheepish look. Guilty. Why didn't you say anything? I liked being just Fallon here. She paused. I still do. He stared at her, heart racing. I'll see you soon, she said softly, then turned and walked out the door. And Shane, standing there with $100 tip in one hand and a CEO's business card in the other, had no idea what just hit him, but he knew he wanted more. Shane wasn't used to second-guessing himself. But all weekend, his thoughts kept circling back to the business card sitting face down on his kitchen counter. He hadn't touched it since Friday night, hadn't even told Silas who the lady with the shiny shoes really was. He didn't want to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. On Monday, he got a call from the bar's owner. Another shift opened. He said yes without thinking. Fallon didn't show, neither did she on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Shane was telling himself it didn't matter. She had her world gala dresses, shareholder meetings, penthouse views. He had his school drop-offs, leftover mac and cheese, and the slow crawl of job applications that never got returned still. When Thursday rolled around and he stepped behind the bar again, he caught himself glancing at the door more than once. At 9:17, she walked in, different coat. Hair down, no jewelry except for a small gold band on her thumb. She looked tired in a way that made her more human than ever. You took a few nights off, he said, pouring her usual. I was in Chicago, board retreat. He slid her the glass. Did they make you climb ropes and bond over trust falls? I wish. Mostly just arguing about acquisitions and who gets the bigger slice of the pie. Sounds exhausting. It is. She took a sip, then looked at him over the rim of her glass. You're the only person I've spoken to in the past week who didn't ask about my quarterly projections. Shane leaned against the bar. I can ask about them if you want. God, no. There was a pause. Then she asked, how's your week been? Silas told his teacher I used to be a lumberjack, so that was fun. She blinked. Were you? No, but I did chop down a tree once in high school. It fell on a neighbor's shed. Fallon laughed, a real one this time, warm and unguarded. I missed that, she said. He tried not to let the words settle too deep. You missed my bad decision stories. I missed you. The air shifted. He cleared his throat. You hungry? I can heat up some wings in the back. She hesitated. Do you have something less? Fried. I've got granola bars and a half-eaten pack of trail mix. Fallon smiled. Then wings it is. While the microwave hummed, he checked on Silas. The kid was still asleep, curled up with a flashlight and a comic book he'd insisted on reading for the third time that week. Back at the bar, Fallon was scrolling through something on her phone with a crease between her brows. Work, he asked, setting the food down, always. She locked the screen and sighed. I'm trying to decide whether to fire someone. He raised his eyebrows. That's heavy. He's been with the company for 8 years, but he's been lying on expense reports, thousands of dollars. Shane sat across from her. What does your gut say? That I can't keep someone who abuses trust. But I also know he's got a kid in college and a mortgage. Then maybe the question isn't whether to fire him, Shane said carefully. Maybe it's how you do it. She looked at him like he'd just handed her an answer she hadn't considered. I forget sometimes that business decisions affect real people. You're not the only one, he said. I had a foreman once who cut 3 guys in a week, said the budget couldn't handle overtime. 2 of them ended up living out of their cars. She was quiet for a moment. You see it all differently, don't you? I see what happens when people at the top forget what the bottom looks like. Her eyes didn't leave his. Then her phone buzzed on the bar. She glanced at it, then flipped it face down without answering. I want to show you something, she said. Now she nodded. Come on, he glanced at the kitchen door. I can't leave Silas, bring him. Fallon, I'm not asking you to do anything crazy, just come for a drive. He hesitated, then went to wake his son. 15 minutes later, they were in the back of a black SUV that Fallon's driver had brought around without being asked. Shane tried not to look surprised. Silas, wide awake now, stared out the window with fascination. They drove through the heart of the city, past buildings Shane had only ever walked by. Fallon didn't say where they were going. Finally, they pulled up to a glass tower with a private elevator. This is your office, Shane asked as she led them inside. My building, she corrected. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, Shane stepped into a world he'd never seen before. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture, a view that made the city look like a model train set. Silas ran to the window in awe. I wanted you to see it, Fallon said, standing beside him. He stared out, hands in his pockets. It's something, all right. I built it from scratch, she said quietly. Started with one investor who believed in me when no one else would. He turned to her. Why bring me here? Because I trust you. And because I wanted you to see that I'm not just some name on a card. This is me. Shane let out a breath. You don't owe me an explanation, I know, but I wanted to give you one. They stood in silence, the hum of the city below them. Then Silas tugged Shane's sleeve. Dad, can we live here? Fallon laughed. I don't know if your dad would want a place with this many windows. Shane gave her a look. You'd be surprised. They stayed for another hour before Fallon had her driver take them home. She didn't come inside, just walked Shane and Silas to their door. Thank you for trusting me tonight, she said. You didn't have to bring us there. I know, but I wanted you to see who I am when I'm not in your bar. Shane nodded, then added, next time I'm showing you my world. Her eyebrows lifted. Is that a promise? It is. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, soft and certain. Then she turned and walked back to the car, not looking back. And for the first time in a long while, Shane felt like maybe, just maybe, his world was about to get a whole lot bigger. The next week, Shane didn't go back to the bar. He got a call from a contractor offering him 3 weeks of steady work on a renovation project across town. It wasn't glamorous scraping tile, hauling beams, dodging splinters, but it paid better than pouring drinks, and it meant earlier nights with Silas and warm dinners that didn't come from a microwave. He told himself that was why he hadn't called Fallon, but the truth sat heavier than that. She'd shown him her world, towering glass and designer silence, and it had felt like stepping into someone else's life. One wrong move, and the illusion would vanish, leaving him standing in his worn boots with drywall dust on his shirt, and no clue what to say to a woman who could probably buy the building he lived in without blinking. Still, by Friday, the silence between them had stretched too long. So when he picked up Silas from school and found a small envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of his truck, he knew before even touching it that it was from her. Inside was a handwritten note, dinner, just us. I'll come to you. Saturday at 7, there was no signature. She didn't need one. At exactly 6:58 the next night, Fallon knocked on the door of Shane's apartment. She wasn't wearing heels this time. Just jeans, a sweater, and a ponytail that made her look startlingly young. She carried a bag that smelled like garlic and something buttery. I brought pasta, she said. And wine, if you'll let me open it. He blinked. You sure this is your idea of a good time? I've had enough white tablecloths and waitlists this month to last a lifetime. I want floors that creak and a kid drawing on the walls. Shane stepped aside. Then you came to the right place. Silas was already on the floor with crayons and a cardboard spaceship he'd made in class. He looked up, squinting at Fallon. You're the window lady, she laughed. I guess I am. Dinner was loud and messy. Silas asked her questions about jet engines and why birds fly but people can't. Fallon answered every single one, even when she clearly wasn't sure. Shane watched her more than he ate, trying to figure out where she'd learned how to talk to a 6-year-old like she'd been doing it her whole life. After Silas fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, Shane covered him with a blanket and poured 2 glasses of the wine she'd brought. They sat at the kitchen table, the light above them humming faintly. Why'd you really come here tonight? He asked. She traced the rim of her glass with her finger. Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, he leaned back. I'm not sure what you see in me. I see someone who doesn't pretend, who looks me in the eye when he talks, who works until his hands bleed and still finds time to make his kid laugh. She took a sip. Do you know how rare that is? I'm not a project. I don't want to fix you, Shane. I just want to know you. He stood, taking his glass to the sink. You say that now. But what happens when I can't take you to the places you're used to, when I can't give you the life you already have? I didn't ask for any of that. No, but it's part of you. Just like this, he nodded around the room, is part of me. She stood too, stepping closer. I don't need another business dinner. I don't need another man who kisses my hand but forgets to ask how I am. I need real. And you are the most real thing I've had in years. He looked down, jaw tight. This scares the hell out of me. Good, she said softly. Because it scares me too. Their eyes met, and something unsaid passed between them. Not lust, not infatuation, something deeper, rawer. Then she did something he didn't expect. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I want to show you something. He unfolded it slowly. It was a drawing, crude, colorful, and clearly done in crayon, a sketch of a tall building with a heart over it and 3 stick figures at the bottom. Silas gave me this last week, Fallon said. Said it was me, him, and you. Said we were standing outside the tower that touches clouds. Shane stared at it, throat tightening. He already sees you as something permanent, she said. I don't want to be the one who proves him wrong. He set the drawing on the table, then turned to her. Fallon, if this goes sideways, if I mess this up, it won't just be me who gets hurt. Then let's not mess it up, he swallowed. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. But I'd rather figure it out with you than pretend I don't want to try. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, the silence between them was full of everything they hadn't dared say until now. Finally, Shane stepped forward, closing the last inch between them. Stay, he said. Fallon didn't move. Tonight? No, stay in this with me, with us. She nodded once, slowly. I'm already here. He kissed her then, not rushed, not cautious, just honest. And when they finally broke apart, neither of them said anything more. They didn't need to. Fallon walked into Shane's apartment on a Thursday evening, carrying a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted almonds. The air outside had turned cold enough to bite, and her cheeks were flushed from the wind. Shane had left the door unlocked after texting her earlier to come by if she was free. Silas had a sitter tonight, someone from the building Shane trusted, a retired nurse who watched him when jobs ran late. You said you were cooking, Fallon said, setting the bag on the counter. So I brought dessert and a backup plan in case you set the smoke alarm off. Shane looked up from the stove where he was stirring something in a battered saucepan. That happened once, maybe twice. She stepped closer and peered into the pot. Is that risotto? Don't sound so surprised. I had a roommate in college who was obsessed with slow food. I picked up a few things. Fallon leaned against the counter and watched him work, the ease in his motions, the quiet focus. This is the first time I've seen you cook, he glanced at her. You've only known me in survival mode. Figured it was time you saw what I'm like when I'm not putting out fires. She nodded slowly. I like it. Dinner was served on mismatched plates, one with a chip on the edge, the other faintly stained from years of use, and Fallon didn't care. The risotto was perfect, creamy and warm, and the wine he'd picked wasn't anything she'd ever stocked in her cellar, but it was good. Honest, they ate at the small table by the window, city lights flickering in the distance. Shane poured them each another glass of wine, then sat back, watching her. You're not wearing your watch, he said. Fallon looked down at her bare wrist. I left it on my desk. My assistant told me I've been checking the time too much lately. Thought I'd try not checking it at all tonight. You always listen to your assistant, only when she's right. Shane swirled his wine. You don't seem like someone who takes orders. I don't. But I've learned when to listen to people who know me better than I know myself. He set the glass down. And what do they think about us? Fallon looked at him, then out toward the city. They haven't said anything, but I see the looks, like I've done something reckless. Like I'm going to wake up one day and regret it. Are you? No, she turned back to him. Not even a little, Shane leaned forward. I don't care about what they think, but you should know this: if you ever decide this is too hard, too different, too far from what you're used to, I'll understand. I won't like it, but I'll understand. Fallon's gaze didn't waver. I'm not afraid of different, I'm afraid of empty, and nothing about you feels empty. They cleared the dishes together. She dried while he washed. The rhythm was easy, unspoken, like they'd done it 100 times. When the last plate was stacked, Fallon reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped box. I wasn't sure if I should give you this, she said. Shane raised an eyebrow. It's not my birthday, I know, just open it. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. The kind that felt expensive without being flashy. Inside the cover, in neat handwriting, she'd written, "For the ideas you haven't had yet." He ran a hand over the page. You remembered. You said once you used to draw up business plans, sketch ideas. I figured you might want a place to start again. He closed the notebook carefully. This mean you're investing in me. It means I believe in you. There's a difference. Shane looked at her for a long moment. You always give gifts like this. No. Just to people who remind me what it feels like to want something more than numbers on a screen. He stepped closer, the distance between them vanishing. You're not like anyone I've ever met. Fallon tilted her head. Good. Because you deserve someone who doesn't blend into the background. They stood quiet for a beat, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound between them. Then Shane said, I want to build something, not just a job or a business, something real. A life that means something to him. He nodded toward Silas's room and to me. But I don't want to do it alone. Fallon reached for his hand. You don't have to. He exhaled slowly, like something heavy had been lifted from his chest. I've been waiting so long to feel like I wasn't just surviving. Fallon stepped into him, resting her head against his shoulder. Then let's stop surviving. Let's build something we're both proud of. 3 weeks later, Shane walked into a downtown office space with tall windows and exposed brick. It wasn't flashy, but it was his. Fallon had found the listing, helped him with the paperwork, and quietly connected him with 2 former contractors who wanted in on his renovation startup. Silas came to the ribbon cutting with a plastic pair of scissors and a grin that stretched ear to ear. Fallon stood beside them, not in heels or designer coats, but in jeans and a blazer, hand tucked in Shane's. Her board didn't understand it. Her assistant whispered but said nothing out loud. Her colleagues speculated, but she didn't care. She was in love. With a man who'd once poured her a bourbon in a bar that smelled like spilled beer and old stories. With a boy who asked her questions about galaxies and called her Fallon the Tower Lady. With a life that was no longer built on expectations, but on something deeper. And Shane. He still worked with his hands, still made Silas laugh until he hiccuped. But now he came home to something more, to someone who saw him, really saw him, and never once tried to change him. They weren't from the same world, but they were building one together, and that made all the difference. The rain had started just after dusk, soft and steady, tapping against the windows of Fallon's townhouse in the West End. She was barefoot, tucked into the corner of her couch with her laptop open, but her eyes weren't on the screen. They were on the man standing in her kitchen. Shane was reading something pinned to the fridge, an old to-do list with neat bullet points in her handwriting. He turned his head toward her. You still haven't cleaned out that coat closet. I've been busy, Fallon said, stretching her legs out. Besides, I was waiting for someone tall enough to reach the top shelf. He walked over and dropped beside her, threading his fingers through hers without hesitation. You sure you're ready for this? I invited them, didn't I? He glanced at the clock. They'll be here any minute, I know. There was a knock at the door. Fallon rose and opened it to reveal a tall man in his 60s, silver at his temples, standing beside a woman with sharp eyes and a wool scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. Her parents. Shane stood up slowly. Fallon's mother's gaze moved over him like she was assessing structural integrity. Her father extended a hand. You must be Shane. Yes, sir. The older man shook firmly, then looked toward Fallon. You didn't say he was taller than me. I didn't say a lot of things, Fallon murmured. They sat around the dining table, the smell of rosemary chicken wafting between them. Fallon had cooked it herself. Shane had made the salad. Her mother noticed. You always cook like this, she asked. Only when I'm trying to impress people who raised a daughter I happen to care about. Her mother's eyebrow rose, impressed in spite of herself. Her father coughed into his napkin to hide a smile. Fallon poured wine. We're not making an announcement, we're just having dinner. Shane nodded. But if you have questions, ask them. Her father looked at him. You run your own company now. Yes, small, but it's growing. I've got reliable partners, steady work, and your son, thriving. He's in a school that challenges him. He reads more than I do. Fallon's mother looked at her. You're happy. I am. There was a long pause, then her father leaned back, gesturing toward Shane. He's different from anyone you've brought home, I know. That's not a complaint. After dessert, her mother asked if she could speak to her alone. They stepped into the kitchen, and Shane pretended not to listen, though every nerve in his body was tuned to the murmur of their voices. Fallon returned 10 minutes later, face unreadable. Well, Shane asked once her parents had left. She said you look at me like I'm the only person in the room. I do, I told her I know. Later that night, they sat on the floor in front of the fireplace. Fallon leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. My parents surprised me, she said. How so? They never approved of anyone. But tonight felt different, like they saw what I see. Shane kissed her temple. What do you see? A future. He looked down at her. So do I. The next morning, Silas burst into the living room wearing a cape made from a bath towel and declared himself Captain Pancake, demanding breakfast and a mission. They made blueberry pancakes as a team, Fallon wearing Shane's old t-shirt and Silas giving instructions from atop a stool. After breakfast, they walked through the park near the townhouse. Silas raced ahead, pretending to fly, while Shane and Fallon strolled behind. You ever think you'd end up here? He asked. Fallon shook her head. I used to think love had to wait until the timing was perfect. Until everything made sense. And now, I think sometimes you just jump and trust that someone will catch you. He stopped walking, pulled her gently to face him, and took a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Her eyes widened. Shane, I'm not asking tonight. I'm not even asking next week, but I want you to know this is where I'm headed. She opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a small diamond set in gold, not flashy, just like him. Tears welled in her eyes. You picked it out already. I knew the moment you stepped into that bar and asked for bourbon that I'd never be the same again. She closed the box and slipped it into her coat pocket. When I'm ready, I'll say yes, I'll wait. That night, they tucked Silas into bed together. Fallon read the story. Shane did the voices. Silas fell asleep with a smile on his face. They lay in bed, limbs tangled, the soft rhythm of rain filling the quiet space between their breaths. I used to think love looked like power, Fallon whispered. And now I think it looks like this. Messy, real, unstoppable, Shane kissed her shoulder. I love you. She turned to face him. I love you more. They didn't need anything else. Not contracts, not promises, just the knowledge that their lives so different, so unlikely had found a way to fit. 1 month later, Shane's company opened a second office, and Fallon surprised him by showing up at the ribbon cutting with a new toolbox engraved with his name. 3 months after that, Fallon's board unanimously approved her proposal for a new community initiative, one focused on affordable housing and small business grants. Shane helped design the pilot site. 6 months later, they stood in front of the courthouse, hand in hand, exchanging vows with only Silas and her parents present. Fallon wore a white dress with no train. Shane wore a tie Silas had picked out. They said their vows barefoot on the steps after rain had soaked the grass. And a year from the night she'd first walked into that bar wearing heels that didn't belong there, they hosted a backyard dinner under strings of lights, surrounded by friends, laughter, and a boy who now called Fallon his second favorite person in the world. Shane still built with his hands. Fallon still ran her empire, but now they built together, not just a life, a legacy, and it was everything they didn't know they'd been waiting for.